Andrew, how are you, man? How's it going?
I'm doing good. It's Monday and it's the start of the week, so I got no complaints.
Heck yeah, dude. So we've been in touch, we've been talking here a little bit, and you are a comic book enthusiast and an investor, is that right?
Something like that. I like to think I am.
Nice, man. Nice. How long have you been a collector? How long have you been doing this?
So I've been reading comics and I came in on a graphic novel front when I was 12. So I'm 28 now. So I've been into comics for 16 years, but I've been really on the investing and buying single issues for the last 10. And so I've been more on, I guess, the business side for the last 10 of buying, selling comics and flipping them and then holding on to them. But I read stories and I read a lot of digital stories. So I'm a mixture of all sorts of bags. But
Heck
16
yeah.
years collectively, 10 years making money, making a lot of money in the last five.
Really, see, that surprises me, man, because that's the last thing I would think there would be like a market for would be investing like in comic books, but from what you're saying, it sounds like, it's a pretty good business to be in if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, you know what it is? It's a fun business, but it's just like anything else in the collectible market or for any investing for that purpose, where if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose your shirt, you can make mistakes, and I don't know anything about I'm trying to think of an investment of football cards as a good example.
Right.
So I'm not going to go and start throwing real money into football cards. Minus, if you pick up a pack of football cards for $5, you're not going to lose your shirt on that. But I'm
Right.
not going to go drop 5 grand on a football card because I don't know anything about it. But somebody
Right.
who's really into football and is into that might spend, 15 grand on a Tom Brady card. And I just happen to know a lot about comic books. I happen to enjoy comic books, and it's just an area that I understand. But I'm also not just a comic book investor. I'm into the stock market and I'm into a variety of other things. I'm into mutual funds. So it's not like I'm coming out of this out of being blind and I'm not completely solely invested into comics. I am diversified across quite a few sectors. So I have that background in my life as
Heck,
well.
heck yeah, man. So it started out pretty much as like a passion, and you found a way to make some money at it, obviously. And
So the funny story of this is that I got into really becoming, I was buying and selling a little bit because it was fueling my hobby to buy new books. But then in college, well, I needed beer money. And all of a sudden you go through saying, oh man, I want to buy new comics next month and I need some beer money. And then you go, oh snap, I have a book that I paid $20 for that's worth $120. Man, I'm good for the next 4 weeks with beer, and I'm good for the next 2 months in comics. And then you sell that book, and then you start saying, wait a second, what else do I have in my collection? And then you start going through it, and then, obviously I just started out really slow, and then one thing led to another, and now it's snowballed into a whole position. But really, sometimes you're just saying, hey, I got no money. What do I have? And you're like, this book's going for $120. I paid $20 3 years ago for it. What's the story behind this? And then you start digging, and then you start saying, oh, it's the artist, it's a low print run. This company is no longer around, or this company is now 15 times the size and their audience wants, more of this. So it's kind of a crazy circumstance, but it sort of just happened. So
right.
yeah, it's
So
weird. Like I don't know how to explain that any other way that it sort of just fell into my lap and then it was already starting, but then that thing just was like a spark and it ignited it all the way through.
So do you have to like stay up with like current events on as far as like, for example, like the new Dune movie that came out? You know what I mean? I'm sure that fueled, the price of a lot of Dune merchandise or books that were out a long time ago. Does that have a lot to do with it as well, or is it more on like the company aspect side, like you said? Maybe company going out of business or
So obviously, anytime a big movie hits, that affects value. Just because whether it's short term or if that movie does really well, or even if it's sort of, it adds a lot of value. So when Venom dropped last year is a good example of this, where or there will be carnage. all the Venom books had a 15 to 20% increase in value. And then about 3 weeks after the trailer dropped, they returned back to normal. And then when the movie hit again, they rose a little bit. So in a short-term value, things will rise up. But ultimately, it's sort of like anything, if you have a good company, you know, excuse me, my throat's sort of not functioning today,
It's all
clearly.
good.
It's been a long day. But I'm gonna be drinking some tea
Yeah.
after this, I promise.
Hell yeah.
But
Love tea, dude.
oh, it's saving grace. I drink an Arnold Palmer every morning.
Nice.
Um, but that's an aside. That has nothing to do with comic book investing. All I could say is that if you drink an Arnold Palmer and then you go into comic book investing, you will be thoroughly awake, is all I'm going to say on that point. But one of the things is that it's kind of like if you buy a good character or a key issue, that's always going to go up. It might not go up every single year, but it's kind of like if you buy good quality, things will go up naturally, or a key issue or something significant in a comic book. Particularly though, that movies do help, but they, in my opinion, they don't create long-term value. They create a short-term value
Right.
because a movie does really well, like the Avengers. That added a lot of value to the Avengers books, and it raised the floor, but I don't think it raised the ceiling. It just made it, if the floor was $300, now the floor is $400. And when that movie first came out or was announced, that floor was $600, for instance, and then it fell back down to 400, but prior to the movie, it was 300. So that's my take. Particularly though, I don't like investing in DC or Marvel books. I
Why
prefer
is it like just do they just not worth anything, or is it more of a
I am a contrary investor, and I think that there's more money and there's more growth in books that are outside of DC and Marvel. I have DC Marvel books. I'll pick up variants, which is a sort of an exclusive cover for it, or it's a limited print run, but I prefer to buy books that have more of a limited print run or are what are known as bad girl art, for instance. And so I like to invest in certain other properties that are not DC Marvel because I think there's more money to be made in those companies because DC and Marvel produce a lot of Batman books. They produce a lot of comics. I think DC and Marvel produce like 98 books every single month.
no
And
kidding?
I'm looking for companies that are producing other things that are more interesting and that are a little bit off the beaten path. Because I think that, the people who want that are going to, pay more money for it, or, you know, they might miss it. And then in 6 months from now, they're like, oh man, I missed that book. Where can I get it? And then I could sell you that book for 6 times what I paid for it, or for
Right.
10 times or 20 times what I paid for it. And so that's kind of where I like to play in, is saying, oh, what's going to be the next thing that nobody looks at? And then all of a sudden I buy a book for 20 bucks and then I sell for 120
That's
with a,
nuts.
yeah, no, it's a crazy world we live in. And so
That's something I feel like too that a lot of people probably overlook. You know what I mean? Just of kind of just kind of overlook that whole aspect of it. So do you go to like conventions then and stuff to find good deals, or are you more like searching online for deals, or how does that work? Is it
So the way I run me at this moment is that I order comics every month, and I have a pretty good sense what's going to hit, what's not going to hit, what's going to, look good, what's not going to look good. And so I have a pretty good sense that I'm like, oh man, this series just seems a little bit weird and off the beaten path. Let me pick up some issues and previews for $2 because you're pre-ordering it and I'll take a spec on it. So that's one way I get my books. And then a lot of people are now doing live streams, and a lot of companies are selling directly to their customer. And so they'll sell me exclusives that are directly to me. And so I'm buying directly from them. And they might just say, we're selling 100 to our audience, but everybody in this stream who comes and is a customer of ours can get it. But there's only 300 of those books out there,
I
for
see.
instance.
I
And
see.
so I'm buying directly from them. And then I also snipe on eBay, where I look for good deals on eBay. And then I try to either make a best offer, or I look for an undervalued book, for instance. And I actually have a really cool book that I picked up that's undervalued. Um, so this is a really cool book because it's actually graded, which means that I can't open this up or read it. And so the reason why this book is really cool is that there's only 3,000 of them.
What is it?
Um,
That's Captain Marvel.
so it's Captain Marvel, but it's not a traditional Captain Marvel book. It's done by a artist named J. Scott Campbell.
Okay.
And so this is a super limited book where it's 3,000 of them.
No
Now,
kidding.
and also this is number 2,149 out of 3,000 printed on the book. Now, CGC has witnessed this and it's encapsulated, meaning that very little air's inside of this. And then they also authenticated the autograph of this book being signed by J. Scott Campbell and Sabine Rich. And
Holy
Sabine
smokes.
Rich did the colors on this, and Campbell did the artwork slash pencils on the cover. And what's cool about this book in particular is that this book glows in the dark.
No kidding. That's freaking awesome, man. Hell yeah,
And
that's a
then, and
beautiful
then
piece too.
and then what they did here to make this book even cooler is the person who got this book graded added another $10 to have this picture up here, because most books that are graded that are signature series don't have a picture like this up there, which adds another value to it. So I picked this book up for 250 bucks. It's probably worth 350 to $400 right now. And I personally like it. At some point, I'm going to sell it, but it's the type of book that is hard to find. It's a pain to find. And most of these books, you know,
It's like
just
one of
having
a
both
kind.
signatures on it just makes it valuable. And that's something that I like to deal with. And somebody, I guess, needed the money. And there you go.
Right. And there you go. Yeah, you got a deal. But do you find yourself sitting in a situation where it's like, man, it may be worth a lot of money, but it just has more sentimental value or just collector value to you? Do you have like a collection that say to yourself, I'm definitely not selling these?
So I have a personal book that I got done myself, and it's this bad boy right here.
Look at that. Holy hot
So
mama.
this is a personal book that's actually a commission. So somebody drew this for
Really?
me, and it's one of my favorite artists who does a lot of comic covers called Elias Chazudis. And I went to a con and I said, "Hey, my favorite work you've done is Firefighter Sexy Samantha," which is a cover he did for New York Comic Con a few years back. And why I like this book in particular is that I said, "Hey, do it with Van Helsing," which is a Zenescope character, and I paid him like 300 bucks for it. He did it all in Copic marker, and then I got it graded. So this is not a book that's for sale, and this has a lot of sentimental value. And this on Instagram on his thing has like 10,000 likes
No
in a
kidding.
matter of a week. And apparently, what happened in the story that Zenescope doesn't like me telling, but I'm shopping in their booth. I just submitted that book for grading, and like, oh man, did you see this cover, man? And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's mine. And so they're showing me my cover
No kidding.
after I just submitted grading it, and like the people at the con and a bunch of people were like, "Oh man, you see this?" And a bunch of people were commenting at the con on that book. So a lot of people know what this book looks like. So, and nobody's made an offer for this book because they know it's not for sale.
Right. But
And
that's like the only one there is, right? It's like
sort of, I'm trying to convince Zenescope to make this into an official cover
right.
so that I'll have the original, but
That's
there'll be
freaking
other
awesome.
books of it. And my goal actually for this is to actually build out another four with different characters and make it a whole set
That would be
because
freaking
I want
sweet.
to frame it and then, I'm planning to do it. But this is a very sentimental book. There's a lot of money into this book. So there's 300 for what he did. The grading process is 30, and then the book itself was 10. So there's $340 worth of minimally into this book. Um, and yeah, so that's very different than, other things. And then I have other books that are just very personal, that are also very expensive. And then I have books that I have just bought that I wanted them. And then I have books that even publishers don't have in their collection. So I have a book
Really?
by Boom Studios signed by the Bella twins because I'm a huge wrestling fan. and the Four Horsewomen, which is Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Bailey, and Sasha Banks. And that book is super cool because you had to buy the book and then you had to win a raffle at San Diego Comic-Con in order to get it signed by all six of those women. And I don't think Boom Studios has a CGC copy of that book in their archives. And it's kind of cool when very few people have that book. It's probably one of the coolest WWE pieces of merchandise out there that's not a wrestler's item.
Huh. That's wild, man. Holy smokes. So do you go to you obviously go to like the local Comic Cons, right? But have you like traveled anywhere to go to them? And like how did they get started? Like and how often they are, you know? Like I've never been to a Comic Con before in my life. Like I wouldn't know what to expect, what would be there, you know.
So we could start out. There's four levels, in my opinion, and people can disagree with me all they want. There's your local Comic Con that's just somebody, maybe there's 300 people, just tables are set up. Maybe there's no panels, and there's dealers, and people are just selling merchandise. And it's sort of like a shopping mall. It's almost like a flea market just for comics and
Right.
collectibles. A lot of them combine Pokemon cards and Magic cards and baseball cards and comics and other collectibles. So that's sort of my level one as I qualify, where it's just a shopping experience. Usually it's you don't have to pay to get in. There's nothing, it's just everybody's happy and it's a shopping experience. And you can get some fun deals because they have dollar books, $5 books, and sometimes they have really expensive books too. But you can go with 30 bucks and have a great time
Right.
at one of those. Then you go to your level two that maybe has a few panels. Maybe it's like a $10 ticket. You know, you're going there and you're meeting people and they have a few comic guests. And I like going to those a lot because I'm not interested in doing business there. I'm interested in networking and trying to snag an interview with like an old school creator who maybe lives in the area, for instance, or maybe, the con paid him 500 bucks and he's happy to sign. And I've had a lot of good experiences at those, such as meeting Scott Lobdell, who writes Teen Titans and did a lot of work on Teen Titans, and got a good interview out of him from that convention. And then I was also just networking with a lot of people because, again, everybody's friendly and nobody's making huge amounts of money.
Right.
Then you go to cons where now you're dealing with 10 to 20,000 people, and now you might have CGC there, which is the grading company. They do stuff like this where they encapsulate your books, or their competitor, which is CBCS. Obviously, bigger guests, people are charging for autographs. There's a lot more panels, and there are people who make a lot of money. And when you're dealing with 10 to 20, possibly 30,000 people, you're now at a bigger level, and it's obviously more corporate. Also, there's a lot of fan panels there as well at those levels. And so that's kind of level three. Some people qualify that as a level four to some degree. The only reason why I distinguish this is that a level four is something like New York Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, possibly a Wizard World when you're dealing with 50,000 plus people.
That's
And
insane.
then it's the same as a level three, but there's a lot more money. There's a lot more management involved. People have handlers. But again, you could go for 50 bucks and have a great time. You could go to, but once you get to the level threes and level fours, those tickets are 60 bucks, 100 bucks. Sometimes they're $150. And so now you're paying to go in, you're
Right.
paying to shop. There's a lot more action. There's less freebie stuff out there. But also there's a lot more industry panels, there's also fan panels and stuff like that.
Opportunities and stuff
So,
like yeah. So how many of
so,
those have you been to? Have you been to like all over the country to them or
I'm lucky where I used to live in New York, about
okay.
40 miles outside of New York City. So going to New York Comic Con or going to a convention in New York City wasn't that bad. So I wouldn't have to stay over in a hotel. So I would just go for the day, do what I gotta do, and then go home. And I've done a bunch of stuff like that. I've traveled up to Boston for some anime con stuff, which is similar. And I stayed in a hotel there and I had a great time with that. Um, and then I lived in DC for 4.5 years before I moved back to Connecticut where my parents live. And when I was in DC, DC is obviously a very big, area. There's about 2.5 million people who live around DC within 25 miles. So DC's attracted big cons, and they attract a con called Awesome Con that does about 50,000 people on average every year. So I was fortunate enough that all I had to do was take an Uber there and back, or take the metro there and back. So I've always lived in an area where I didn't have to travel all that far to do big cons, because if you have to stay in a hotel, it gets expensive.
Oh,
And
yeah, for sure.
after a while, my whole thing is that, like, I want to save and spend as little money on accommodations to get to the con, whether that's an Uber or, a hotel, because that means I have more money now to actually buy stuff. And I also like to sleep in my own bed,
Yeah, for sure.
so that's kind of my thing. But yeah, it's cool though. What I recommend is that, obviously stay as local as possible, because I'm not a business in the sense that I am not selling a comic book at a con. So I'm not on that side. My business is on eBay. It's on Facebook Marketplace. It's private sales.
Right.
I am not interested in doing business at a con, because I don't foresee that being the future. I think you could get good deals at cons per se. I think you can buy really, interesting items at cons. I think cons are fun, but I don't want to sell at a con, because on that flip side, you have to pay for table space, and you have to pay for a variety of other things. You also have to be up on your feet or preoccupied for 23, 24 hours over 3 or 4 days. And I think I can be way more effective on eBay, Facebook Marketplace, with a little bit of SEO help. I could open up a Shopify store and run that thing on auto. You know, if I want to sell, if I want to sell this book at some point I will sell it, is going to be going up on eBay at some point. I don't know when. It could be years, it could be tomorrow. I have no idea. It's not going to be tomorrow, but in 2 years from now, I might sell this book for 700 bucks on eBay. Why would I want to sell it at a con and have to pay 350 bucks for a table? And
Right.
obviously, people are going to pass by and they're going to see it, but also on eBay, I could sell anywhere in the world. I'm not limited to just that con. And I get at arms with people on this very topic, because people disagree and say you're going to sell the most at a con. And I'm like, but I could sell to 350 million people in the United States alone.
Right. And I was
If
going to
there's a
ask you,
con, yeah.
like, is eBay still king, do you think, as far as like selling merchandise like this, or is Facebook Marketplace kind of taking over, or some other, app, or, uh, not,
So
but
my thoughts on this is that I pay eBay 13%. Now somebody might say that's steep. The reason why I don't think it's steep is that I get eBay protection. If you and me make a private deal on Facebook Marketplace, you pay me through PayPal, and then all of a sudden you file a dispute with PayPal, it could go one or the other way. But if you
right,
have the book and you win, I'm out of the book. If you file a dispute with eBay, eBay has me covered under seller protections. So I would rather, if I'm going to be selling you, if it's a $10 item, I'm not that concerned, because I don't want to lose money at all. But if I lose 10 bucks, that's just the price of doing business. But if it's a $700 item, 13% is a lot of money. But at the same time, and $700, if you file a dispute and then you win on PayPal, and I have friends who have comic shops and they do live sales and things of that nature, and they get stiffed out of money. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are making a really good case for eBay for me. So
right.
I don't think eBay is the greatest place, but at the end of the day, I know people who've been stiffed out of 50 grand. Now they're selling $500,000 worth of merchandise, and they've won some of that money back. But at the same time, you know, that's a nightmare for me. I mean, I make good money on eBay, and I'm making a decent amount of money on eBay. But if I was stiffed out of 50 grand, or even half of that, of 25 grand, and I won $25,000, I got $25,000 back, that can sink a business really quickly,
Oh yeah,
especially in your
for
first
sure, dude.
year.
For sure,
So
man.
this is why I sell on eBay. And you know what it is? I don't feel comfortable as a seller to sell on eBay. no, I don't feel comfortable as a seller sell on Facebook Marketplace. I'll buy on Facebook Marketplace and pick items up, which is different. So I wouldn't have a problem if you said, "Hey, let's meet by the police station. I'm really interested in this book. Would you take 600 for it?" And
Right.
we're meeting by the police station, and you're paying me in cash. That I don't have a problem with. But also, in today's age, that's a little scary as well.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Absolutely. I'd be more into doing probably like the Bitcoin transaction myself, but
No, I'm not against that either.
you know,
I don't have a problem with that. My only issue with crypto is that crypto is so volatile at the moment
right,
that I I wouldn't mind doing it in USD. So USD is obviously a more stable coin.
right,
That I would do it in USD. I would not do a deal in Bitcoin. I actually don't own Bitcoin. I own Ethereum. I'm more of an Ethereum guy, and I like Algorand, and I like some other cryptos. But like Solana is sort of nice, but again, it's so volatile that
right.
I don't want to go and utilize a volatile coin. But I don't have a problem with a crypto transaction like USD or DAI, for instance.
Heck yeah. Senior comic book made me think of one I have. I'm gonna go look for it real quick if you don't mind.
Oh, please go right ahead.
Yeah,
This
just
is
give me one
awesome.
second and I'll be right back. All right. I don't know why I didn't think to grab this and show it to you before the show, but my brother got this for me a few years ago, and it's not in like perfect condition or anything, but it's a Star Wars comic book, and I don't know if it's it says bonus digital edition or whatever. I think it's a special edition, but it's pretty cool, anyways.
So this is the thing about comic book investing. So there's a few sides to it. Obviously, I'm a fan of comics, and this is why this is so cool is that I enjoy looking at this stuff. And so I read comics, I buy comics, I enjoy comics. Not everything I buy is an investment, or not everything I'm going to make money on. I probably make money on 40% of what I buy, but out of that 40%, I'm making 60% profit margins to 120. Sometimes I make 300% profit margins, but I also buy things that I just want to enjoy. And with comic book investing, if you said to me, "Oh man, I'll give a great example. There's a movie that's coming out called Canto.
Okay.
Canto is an IDW property done by my friend David Booher, and he's writing the movie, which is kind of cool. And Canto One was a book that came out of nowhere, and that book is now a $350 book. That was when you first bought it, like $5.
No
So
kidding.
that's the thing about comics is that all of a sudden, you can go and I mean, I'm going to show this one again, where who would have ever thought that Captain Marvel in the Marvel universe would be relevant? Really, I mean, if you told me 30 years ago, I'm 28, so I wouldn't have been born, but if you told me 20 years ago Captain Marvel would have had a movie, I would have been like, you're fooling me. You're
Right.
joking, right? And this isn't anything against Brie Larson or anybody like that. It's the idea that I didn't even think that a Captain Marvel movie was on the docket till legitly like 6 years ago. And that's the thing, though, is that if you bought Captain Marvel's first appearance, and when, I think Captain Marvel might have been a guy first, and then it was a girl, or it might have been a girl, I don't know, or Ms. Marvel, she might have been Miss Marvel. I'm really bad at the Marvel stuff. I'm more of a DC guy. But the idea is that if you have that first appearance, that book is worth a lot of money. And you probably could have gotten that book dirt cheap because nobody in their right mind ever thought and said, "Oh, we're going to have a Captain Marvel movie." And that's the thing about, comic book investing as well, is that a bunch of it is speculative, but then you hit home runs. I've done it a bunch of times and I've had really good exits. I have an Ultimate Fallout 4. I have two of them sitting in my basement. I got both of them for free on Free Comic Book Day at Midtown Comics. They were giving that book away for free, and that those both of those books are going for 400, sometimes to 1,200 bucks a piece.
No kidding. Are you shitting me? That is
And
crazy.
what agitates me is that COVID hit, and My goal was I was going to get both of them graded and signed by the creative team behind it at AwesomeCon because they were both supposed to be there. I had the money to do it, and then AwesomeCon got canceled.
Damn.
So if that came back as a 9.8, those books would be worth like 2,500 a piece.
That is insane.
So
That
I would
is
have
hard to
sold,
comprehend.
so I would have sold one of them and I would have kept one for myself. But even if it came back as a 9.2, which is not a great grade, but it's not a bad grade either, still would have been worth good money. And so it would have been worth maybe like $900, but I would have put in maybe 200 in it to produce nine. So it's the idea that this is where this stuff gets a lot of fun is that, you know, when you do well and you could hit really big on this stuff. And but it's very interesting because obviously I'm an investor and I view all this stuff from an investing purpose. So I say to myself, okay, what can a book do? And if I put X into the book, what is it going to return? Is if I get the book graded, if I get it signed, how much money am I going to be putting in? What can I sell it for? And then does that outbeat pound for pound if I just sell the book raw? So selling a book raw, this is a raw book, for instance. This book's not worth much. I just enjoy this story. Um, it's not worth much. That book, maybe in 10 years, if the cover price on this book is $4, maybe in 5 years it'll be worth $5.
I
But I
see.
just enjoy that story
Right.
a lot. So I'm not worrying, but all of a sudden, let's say that there's a main event that comes out of DC and there's a runaway character that comes out of Titans Academy #5. That book can now be worth $50 out of nowhere. And it happens
Just
all the
like that.
time.
So we have a local comic book shop here in Erie, Pennsylvania.
I know
That,
the question. I already think I know the question,
do
but
you?
can you ask it anyway?
We have a local comic book shop here in Pennsylvania, and it's been a while since I've been down there. But the last time I was down there, man, they have just comic books by the case, man. They're all over the place, and they range from a quarter to 20, 30, however much you want to spend. Probably. Is there anything that would be? Do comic book stores often overlook opportunities, selling opportunities? Is there something that I could look for down in like the quarter 50-cent box that may be worth more, but the comic book stores are maybe too lazy or too, just not worth their time to kind of individualize them?
So my experience with comic shops is that it depends on what's going on. So I'll tell a story that will answer half of this, and then I'll answer the other half. I promise.
Okay.
Um, I went to a store once, and the guy bought legitly 20 long boxes. A long box holds 300 comics, and he bought all 20 of them, I think, for $700. So he bought approximately $6,000 worth of comics, and I think he combed through a bunch of it. But what this guy Mark figured out is that he said, "Look, I pulled out in the first 3 or 4 boxes all the big books, and maybe he pulled out 50 books that he was going to sell for $25 a piece. Then he still had like 5,900 books left. So what he did is that he priced all of them at $1. There was more than $1 worth of stuff in there, just in back issues and really cool books. So there was a book from a company called Aspen for Customer Appreciation Day. Those books are super cool, and those books go for like $10 a pop. He was charging $1 for it. And then there was a leather bound Lady Death 10,000 copy, and it's a leather comic. It's a cool book. It's like $15 on eBay right now. So he was pricing it all for $1 because what he realized, and whoever he bought this collection from obviously loved these books and treated these books like they were gold as if it was a collector, but he probably bought it for 700, 800 bucks at most. But you have 6,000 books, and if you're going to be selling all this stuff for $1, and legitimately he brought it in a day and a half before I got there. So like nobody combed through this stuff. And so that's what happens sometimes in comic shops is that they're like, we just brought in 6,000 books that we paid pennies on the dollar for, and we know there's more than 6 grand. or 8 grand, or we know we're going to get 10,000 out of it, but we want to move this as quick as possible. So for the next 2 weeks, it's a buck for everything in here. And if that's a $10 book, I don't really care because I'm making my money on it. It's
Right.
kind of like if I buy a book for $1 and then I sell for $4, and then you come into my eBay store and if somebody came into my eBay store and had all these dollar books and said, "Hey man, can you give me 25% off? I'm about to buy 100 books off of you and you're pricing them at $4." And, I would take that deal and I would run away with it because it's real money. You know, that's what comic shops do sometimes. So sometimes they price books at $1
To give you
because
the opportunity to make money on it because
just to move it out, or they picked it up for so cheap that if you pick up a book for 50 cents, they'll price it at $1. But what they're hoping is that you go into a comic shop with 40 bucks in your pocket and you walk out with 40 bucks. So they paid 20 for it. And then they're doing three things. They're moving merchandise, they're selling you books that you want, they're keeping the community alive in a lot of ways because now you're fulfilling your collection, you have a good experience, and they're also making room for new merchandise.
right,
And so in that quarter bin, there's books that are worth more than a quarter. In that 50 cents bin, there's books that are worth more than 50 cents. In the dollar bin, there's books that are worth more than $1. In the $5 bin, there's books that are worth less than $5, and so on and so forth. But if you know what you're looking for, and you can find deals all the time, but you will not find $100 book in a dollar bin if the shop operates accordingly.
yeah,
Now, it happens where there was a sign on Instagram and it sparked a massive debate in the comic community. With what happened was is that a shop put up a sign saying we reserve the right to check any prices at counter because books fluctuate. But
right,
here's the problem with that, and there was two sides to it, is that if you have a book that's fluctuating, it should not be out in the wild, for lack of a better word. At least the way I see it, it should not be. And maybe I'm wrong on all of this. But if you know a book goes up 20% one day, down 20%, goes up 20% down, and it's fluctuating, or it has a price range of anywhere from $50 to $90, and it's been doing that for the last month, that should be behind the counter. That
I
should not
agree.
be in a long box or a case, you know, because that just doesn't make sense. That's called a book that should be flagged. And comic shops should have systems in place that do that. But again, I've gotten books that should have been 40 bucks for $10, and I've gotten books that were 20 bucks that really sell for $10. So, I mean, but there's deals to be found, and it's just that you got to go search for it. And then also, books sometimes just randomly happen. As I stated, it could very well be that there's a character in this comic right here that's a runaway character, and this could be going for $1, and in 3 years from now, it could be the runaway book.
Right.
There were Ultimate Fallout 4 books that were in back issues, not anymore, but 2 years after that, they were selling for maybe $5. Now that's a $350, 400, sometimes a $1,200 book, you know? And so now, but legitimately 6 years ago, that book was $6 in a back issue in a long box. So, stuff like that happens.
Yeah, for sure, dude. For sure. Did you ever get into like the Dragon Ball Z manga like books, the comic books that were like thicker?
I have those too.
Do
I
you?
have those too. I am very much a graphic novel reader, a manga reader. I do have an entire Dragon Ball Z set. I actually want to buy a new one, and it's on my to-do list because now what they've done with that, which is awesome, is that they've actually packed up the Dragon Ball in its own case. They've packed up set one of DBZ, packed up set two of DBZ, and set three so that it's fresh and it's in its own like little carrying case. And I'm planning to buy a Naruto one as well. And
Nice.
I would buy a Bleach one, but Bleach is not a good show. So we're gonna end on that note right there with Bleach because as much as I not like to beat up Bleach, Bleach is rough.
Right. I remember I
I'm
was
an
pretty,
anime weeboo. Like I'm an anime weeboo, and I know what I am, and I got no problem admitting that
yeah,
I'm like a super nerd.
that's nothing wrong with that, man, at all. I was pretty young when I got into the Dragon Ball Z ones, and I was like, it took me a while to get used to them because you got to read them from like the right to the left. You got to start backwards. It's not like a traditional Superman comic or something where you just flip through the pages, you know. So it took a little bit getting used to, but I really enjoyed them, you know, the graphic novels.
Yeah, no, if you just want to read comics, and that's the other thing too, is that if you just want to read comics, you should just buy graphic novels because it's easier, it's more enjoyable, or you should read it digitally because there's a lot of cheap digital options on how to read comics. You could read so many comics with Comixology, which is a digital thing. And if you have an iPad or a Kindle or whatever, I don't know what other tablets are out there, but they have an app for it and it's Amazon. And I think it's like $6.37. And I read a lot of graphic novels digitally where it's like 11 o'clock at night, my lights are turned out, and I don't feel like cracking open a book,
Right.
but I like opening up my iPad.
Still, nothing beats the experience though of, you know, a freaking comic book though, man. You know, nothing beats that feel, that authentic, you know, feeling
I
you
I
get.
I definitely enjoy reading comics, the like an actual book. But there gets to a point where there's certain things I don't want to go buy and pay for. And so that's what I do a lot of comicsology. So I just read a book on the Black Dahlia, for instance. I have no desire to go and buy that graphic novel, not because it wasn't good, but because I don't even know where I can find it minus Amazon. There's a lot of stories that I don't want to personally purchase and own, but I don't mind borrowing. And unfortunately, my library, where I live in Connecticut, doesn't have a lot of graphic novels. And going to the library, it's just a hassle when I legitimately can just borrow from a digital library. And I read a lot of graphic novels in that realm. And I like to buy what I want to read again. And the comic books that I read, obviously I'm very selective because it does get expensive, this hobby. And I know people who spend like 300-400 bucks.
Yeah,
My goal is to spend less than 50 every single month on comics.
that's a good goal to have.
As a reader and in my personal stash, as an investor, it's a little bit different
Right.
because I cash flow my business. So I will go and in order to purchase this book, I will sell something else. So I will buy a book, I will try to double my money or triple or quadruple my money, and then I try to put into a new project and then a new project and a new project. But I also do something very different where whenever I sell a book, so if I paid 250 for this, if I sell this book for 500, eBay's fees come out first and foremost, then the 250 comes out, and then whatever left over is profit that goes into the stock market or goes into cryptocurrencies or goes into another investment, and then I find another book for 250 bucks.
Heck yeah, man.
So so what I do is that now it has a forward carry. And so I've set up because the idea is that, and I'm very honest about what this is. This is a non-productive asset by definition. It has value, it tends to increase in value, but it is a non-productive asset. I buy a dividend producing stock with all the money I generate out of comics. So then that produces me I guess it gives a productive asset where I own the stock and then I own the dividends that it then produces that then buy new shares. And then after a while, when you have 200, 300, 400 shares every single quarter, year, month, or bi-monthly or whenever you're doing it, is then buying you new shares. And then all of a sudden you have real assets and you're tearing down. And if this is a foreign concept to anybody, I recommend looking at what Tai Lopez is doing. I recommend what Grant Cardone does. I recommend looking at all these gurus who go and teach you a course. And then what do they do with that money from the course? They're buying real estate, buying businesses, buying a lot of other things. And because God forbid this thing goes to hell, well, I just generated 10K in real producing, real asset production, things that produce money
Yeah.
out of this. And so that's what I do. And it's very, very effective. And so I'm running this very differently than other people.
That's all right though, man. I think, for 28 years old, man, it seems like you got a good head on your shoulders. You know what you're doing.
I'm just getting started. I
That's
am
freaking
just getting
awesome.
started because I don't know if I can curse on here. I would use
I don't
just
care. Yeah,
getting
absolutely.
planking started, and I'm being very very cordial because I don't know what language I can use, and I'm
You can
trying
say
not to
whatever you
offend
want,
anybody.
man. You're not going to offend anybody. You can say whatever you want. This is a one of those type of podcasts. But I think, man, I think it's awesome what you're doing, and I love to see and hear the different investment opportunities that are out there that a lot of people probably don't even really know about. I think the stock market can be quite intimidating for a younger generation, and I think that's pushed a lot of people towards cryptocurrency. Um, but the other options like comics and things, I think is great. Whether it be comics, football cards, whatever your
So,
niche is.
so my whole entire thing and my advice, and obviously I'm not a certified financial advisor yet. It's a goal of mine in 2022,
Awesome.
and whether I meet that goal or not, I don't know because life is unpredictable at the moment. But it's something that I want to do because I think it'll be very beneficial to me personally, and I think I can also help people, and I think it'll add credibility to what I'm trying to do. But my advice is that, you know, whatever you want to invest in, learn about it, understand it, because what I'm doing with comic books is no different than what I'm doing with crypto. It's no different than what I'm doing in the stock market, where I legitly have sat down. This and Apple stock are the exact same thing. The only difference is that it's so because they're both assets. The only difference is that this asset acts slightly different than a stock will act. This asset acts slightly different than Bitcoin, but it's all the same, I guess, gears. They're just arranged differently in a lot of ways. And so once you understand what comic book investing is, then that's a gateway to understanding what the stock market is. It's a gateway to understanding what crypto is. And so I came in very much into the stock market. Then I got into comics. And then while I had to retool some things and learn some traits per se as a comic book investor, you know, it wasn't as bad of a learning curve. And then conversely, I got into crypto after all this because I do own crypto and it's similar in that fashion because a lot of the research stuff that I do in comic books is similar to stocks, it's similar to crypto. And those skills are extremely translatable. So, as somebody who wants people to invest, you know, pick a sector, learn all you can about it. And then if you say, hey, man, this comic book stuff sounds really cool, you're going to then start doing research and be like, oh, I see the similarities. And because I want people to win, I want people to be rich. I'm a capitalist and I want people to have money and I want people to be financially free because once you're financially free, you could say fuck you to anybody you want to say to, and you have that power and your life dramatically changes. I am in a
Yes, dude.
position that I can do that on my podcast. I'm in a position that I can do that in about probably 12 out of the 15 things that I want to do in my life. I can't really do that at my job, but my job doesn't torture me.
Yes, dude. I love what you're saying right now, man. I completely 100% agree, dude. Because, that's what it's about, man. It's about being out from out underneath the thumb of debt, really. Debt, if you're in debt, they control you basically, and it's all about taking back your future. And
There's one exception to that. If you own money on your house, but you're paying your mortgage, that's not debt to me. You technically are in debt in those circumstances, but you're also paying you're managing debt. So I don't have a problem with debt if it's serviceable debt, for instance. So if you took out $100,000 on a business, but you're producing $30,000 and your overhead is 15 and you're servicing that debt at 7,500 every single month, you're not being controlled by your debt because you're servicing your debt. But if you owe $100,000 in student college loans, you have a bigger problem where you are owned in a lot of ways because you
right,
cannot produce wealth. There's a difference between those two things, but that is a way more complicated thing that I want to go into. It's kind of like if I don't know, I'm not buying a house at the moment, but if I owe 300,000 on a house, but I'm making mortgage payments, that's not controlling me on debt because that I'm slowly buying equity essentially, which is different than debt. If you owe $30,000 in credit card debt, you're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. Credit cards are definitely the downfall of society. I think.
If we were to get rid of two things in the world, we would get rid of credit cards because credit cards are evil. And look, I use credit cards, but I pay my credit card things down, and I'm gonna get flack for it, and everybody can disagree with me, but most people don't know how to pay off their credit cards or don't understand when you purchase something on a credit card, you are 18 to 23% more likely to spend more money. Just to put that in position, if you were willing to spend $200, that means on a credit in cash on a credit card, you were willing to spend anywhere from another $34 to $46 more on your credit card. So that's a problem because that's a big jump. And then when you get the bill, because you don't get any emotional pain from a credit card. When you swipe at your credit card, you don't feel pain. I
Right.
feel pain when I go to a Comic Con. I bring cash because my wallet comes in with $1,000 or $1,500, and at the end of the day, if I have $750 left, I feel the weight go away.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And I'm not saying I use credit cards to service, purchases and use cash flow because sometimes in your business, I have to wait 3 days for eBay to pay me and I gotta go pick up another book. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm on top of that. My credit card only has a $1,200 limit. So I cannot get in the hole too deep.
Right. But dude, one thing with the freaking credit card companies, like I just paid a significant portion on my credit card a few months ago. And dude, literally the next morning, I had an email that says my credit line's been increased. We bumped you up because of all these reasons. And it's like they're trying to lure you in to spend more, to, get further in debt. And
I
it's
asked them to lower
unreal, dude.
mine. I asked them
Unreal.
to lower mine purposely and they did.
That's good.
I said lower mine or I'm canceling it, and they lowered it.
That's good. Yeah.
And I had a really good credit card. I had a TD Ameritrade credit card, which was 1.5% back. But the kicker on that one, and this I'm so upset because it just changed, was that if I transferred my rewards into a brokerage account, I got an additional 10% back. So I would wait till I have $50, and then I would transfer essentially $50 into my brokerage account on my rewards, so I could buy stock, and then I'll get another $5. That credit card is now defunct. And the reason why is that it was 1.5% back on everything. So I'd be buying comic books that I would be selling, get 1.5% back, put it into the stock market, into dividend producing assets, sell the books, buy even more stock. And through the course of that credit card for about 3.5 years, I probably added about $500 to $600 worth of stock just on that credit card alone,
Oh, wow.
plus just in the rewards, plus whatever I was buying and selling on that. And it was great. And I was never late. But again, I had $1,500, essentially on my credit card to use. And I don't have overdraft on my thing. I turn that off on my debit card. I cannot overdraft. I cannot get in. I've set up all these parameters purposely. And you could call me crazy. You could call me Dave Ramsey. That's fine, you know, but I'm becoming very, very wealthy and I'm putting a lot of parameters on how I operate and it's working. And, that's the thing too, is that I think, when you're an investor and once you start really going into this and start understanding, you know, this is what happens is that you start taking control of your money. And look, I'm going crazy in my life because I'm trying to cash flow things. December's not being a good month for me because buying gifts is difficult. And, I'm not happy about my cash flow this month.
Right.
But
I get
I'm
you.
also not broke because I have a lot of assets that produce. My assets aren't going down. My cash flow is a little bit tighter than I want it to be at the moment.
Right.
But what'll happen in January is it'll go back up again. So, you know, but yeah, credit cards are not good. That doesn't mean don't have a credit card. It
Right.
means understand what you're doing with your credit
They're
cards.
good for emergencies for sure, but society has definitely created like this impulsive, buy attitude. And expect I'm 30 years old. I'm only a couple years older than you are, but it seems like with our generation and the generation below us, nobody really cares about debt. And nobody seems to think about it. It's just buy, buy, buy. max everything out, and somebody else will end up picking up the bill later on down the road. It seems to be the mentality, and that's just super dangerous. The trap, in my opinion.
It's very, very dangerous, and I don't think people understand this. I got into a debate with somebody, and people say, "Oh, why are you all angry? You have people spending so much money at Comic Cons. Why are you all angry about it and getting all pissed off?" And I made a statement, and I said, "I'm very judgmental of people who use credit cards at Comic Cons. I'm very judgmental of it." And so he said, "Why are you judgmental? Why do you have the right to be judgmental?" Well, I'm judging you not based on race, creed, sexuality. I'm judging you based on an action. And that's how you should be judged on.
I agree.
And I was like, and I got attacked, and like people were like getting all bent out of shape. And I'm like, this proves the point. And what I figured out is I said, you just spent a lot of money at a con and you probably put it on a credit card, didn't you? And you didn't use cash. And I figured out really quickly that because at least I made something honest, because I don't judge people based on any of what I just said. I judge people based on their actions. So, what is, I don't judge somebody being based on being rich. If you flick me off and you're rich, I'm judging you based on you flicking me off.
Right.
And so and this guy is maybe 2, 3 years younger than me, and I figured out what happened. I even offered to him and I said, "Look, man, I've been doing this, going to cons for over 10 years. I've been talking about this. I'm building out an entire class on comic book investing. Hopefully that's coming out in June, that I'm slowly working on. Like, I'm not talking in this realm. I understand con economics and I understand what happens." And I said to him, I said, "Look, if you and your friends who disagree with me all want to sit down with me in a Zoom call or a StreamYard call, let's do it." And the second I dropped that, the conversation ended. And I'm like, "I'll do it for free, guys. I legitimately get paid by people in consulting to do this." And I'm like, "I'll do it for free because once you listen and you understand what I'm going with, you're never ever going to do it again, ever, because I logically present things to people
Right.
in this, and I have a system that works. And you might think I'm crazy. That's fine, but you know what is? I know how to make money at cons, and I know how to not lose money, and I also know not how to have Monday regret. Because all the stupid shit you could buy at a con, if you put it on a credit card, you regret it on Monday, and then 2 weeks later, it bites you in your ass again because you're like, I spent $70 on this thing.
Right.
But I think it's a big problem, because I think, I don't want to say the generation behind you and me is dumb, but I don't think they're educated on money. And I don't know what the reason is of that.
I completely agree. I think a lot of it has to do with the education system. I think that is a conversation that is far too big for one episode.
Sorry, I tend to do that.
But I love it, dude. I love everything you're saying, man. I think you have a great head on your shoulders, and I think you're going to do really well. Before we wrap this episode up, though, I would like you to kind of give a shout out where people can find you. You mentioned you have a podcast. Is that right?
I do have a podcast. So it's called Conversations in Pop Culture, is the one I'm working on right now, and my other one's on hiatus, which is the Pop Anime Comics Lounge. So Conversations in Pop Culture can be found on YouTube under the Pop Anime Comics brand, which is my, I guess, parent company. And then from there, so you can watch it. It's live on YouTube, and then it's also replay, so you can watch at any convenience you want. I also am on Facebook Live. So that's under my page, Pop Anime Comics. I share it out also on Twitter at Pop Anime Comics. I'm on Instagram at Pop Anime Comics. You can read a lot of my work on anime, comics, pop culture at popanimecomics.com. And then you can access my other show there as well, which is Pop Anime Comics Lounge. Similar interview show. I talk to a lot of comic creators, writers, artists, cosplayers, professional wrestlers, voice actors, and so yeah, that's what I do, and all that stuff is free. So you type in Conversations in Pop Culture. Right now, I am not a podcast. I'm just on Facebook Live, YouTube, but I am launching a Kickstarter in January. I actually just had a meeting with somebody for a really cool collab. And that's going ahead. I'm getting that ready to launch. And then if we meet certain goals, this will become a podcast. Just so everybody's well aware, I am going to be this year, I'm going to be over 170 episodes just for this year. Last year I did 90. So if you want the next 340 hours of your life occupied, you go back to episode 1 of Conversations in Pop Culture, and you will be good for 340 hours of your life.
I
And
love it.
I do have an interview tonight, actually, at 8 o'clock. So you all can come and tune in for that. Or I get it, it's 8 o'clock at night on a Monday. You might be watching wrestling or something else. I get it completely. You can watch at your earliest convenience because they stay up on Facebook and YouTube indefinitely. So that's everything that's going on. And I do have a comic book investing class that is slated to come out in June of next year. So I'm going to teach you how to basically do all the skills you need for comic book investing, from research to budgeting to grading to exit strategies. And I'm the boss of that, so I get to set the price, and I
Yeah.
want to do it slightly cheap because I think people should learn these skills, and I kind of want to do it slightly cheap, a little expensive, but not too expensive given how much courses cost out there. But it will be for life, so you pay once and you're in for life.
Absolutely. Dude, that's freaking awesome, man. I freaking love it, dude. I freaking love it, man. That is awesome. Cool beans. Well, this has been a lot of fun, dude. You filled me in on a lot of great knowledge I did not know about, which I'm super excited about. So uh it was fun, man. Thank you for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, man.